Shalom, grace and welcome to this week's edition of Pinei Torah with Yeshiva Shuv. I'm Al-Tzur Cabeza Perez, and this week's Torah portion is Parashat Mishpatim. Now, we have several laws that are given to us that are meant to allow us to live in a society that we can be concerned one for another and get along and have justice among us. But there are also deeper meanings to the things that are revealed in this Torah portion. So, in the beginning of the teaching, I want to go into some of the practical understandings of the Mishpatim that we're going to go over, the social justice that we are to have amongst ourselves. But there are also deep revelations of Mashiach, as in every parasha, that we will conclude with at the end of this study. So, we begin in the book of Shemot, Exodus chapter 21, beginning with the very first verse that reads, Ve'ele hamishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. Now these are the judgments which you shall set before them, referring to the children of Israel. Now I would like to go to the explanation on these particular words that are used for different types of commandments or statutes that are given to us. Regarding the word mishpatim, in comparison with the word chok, we turn to Rabbeinu Bachya in Exodus 15:25, where he states that the word chok relates to a statute and mishpat relates to social legislation. In other words, they are things that correspond to us between each other. Now, last week's Torah portion, we went over the Ten Commandments, and we see that the first half of the Ten Commandments had to do with our conduct and our relationship with Adonai, while the second half had to do with our conduct and relationship with each other. And that specifically has to do with the Mishpatim. Rabbeinu Bachya goes on and says that the word chok, for example, applies to phenomena which are known only on a practical level, whereas the Mishpatim can also apply to knowledge of the inner workings of the why and the wherefore the phenomena in question is taking place. And so we see that not only are the Mishpatim given to us to help us to live in harmony with each other, but there are also deep meanings that are being taught to us through these Mishpatim. And so we see in a few examples that are given to us in the Parashat, beginning in verse 22, we see the example through 25 of the following. If men fight and hurt a woman with child, so that she gives birth prematurely, yet no harm follows, he shall surely be punished accordingly as the woman's husband imposes on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. Make note that he's talking about some type of restitution being paid. But if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Interestingly enough, what they translated in this particular translation as stripe is the word chabura, which has the same root word of the word chaver, a friend, or something that attaches itself to something else. And this is the very same word used in Isaiah 53 regarding the Mashiach, the suffering servant Ben Yosef, who through his stripes, or through attaching ourselves to him, or through connection with him as his friends, we are healed. But that's another discussion. As far as how we can understand eye for an eye and tooth for tooth, let's go and read the words of Mashiach, who discusses this particular subject. In the book of the book of Matthew, chapter 5, 38, all the way through 40. It says, you have heard that it was said. Now pay attention closely. You have heard. He did not say it is written. He's not disputing what is written. He is clarifying the understanding of what is written. You have heard it said relates to the interpretations that were given to this particular passage. So he gives a clear and cut understanding of what we are to understand by this passage. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. So immediately Mashiach goes and gives an example associated with restitution. If someone sues you, if you owe them anything, don't just give them back what you owe them. Give them even more. Make sure that you are reconciled with your brother and have no fault. And this is the context of what Mashiach is talking about in regards to eye for eye. Don't forget that the word eye, ayin, also has to do in the Hebrew language with a source, like a well of some sort. So there are many ways to understand this word ayin, but the point that Mashiach is making is that we need to reconcile and repay and rectify whatever wrongs have been done. And so we see the same understanding given to us through the sages. Rabbeinu Bachya says the following on this particular subject. Ayin tachat ayin. Mechita Nezikin, section 8, understands these words as the value of an eye for an eye. The value of an eye for an eye. And not that the guilty party is being deprived of his own physical eye. Keep in mind, Mashiach himself said, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. Yet none of his disciples plucked out their eyes. They understood well that he was speaking within the concepts preserved in Judaism because they were Jewish. Proof that this interpretation is correct can be deduced from the verse 19, where the Torah had legislated financial compensation for injuries caused to a fellow human being. If we would inflict upon a person who had struck and caused injury to another person a similar injury to the one he had inflicted, what would there be left for him to pay? He himself would then be inflicted and in need of medical attention, and he himself would then suffer the loss of income while being laid off and unable to work. Furthermore, if we were to apply the principle of an eye for an eye literally, meaning the Peshat, which they were not understanding this in the Peshat, this would often not be justice at all. That would not be Mishpat. If a man ruins the only eye of a one-eyed individual and he had an eye of his removed as a penalty, the former would remain blind, whereas the guilty party would still have a good eye to see with. What kind of justice would this be? Moreover, a weaker individual might not survive having his eye gouged out, so that he would pay with his life for having ruined the stronger person's eye. Surely this would not be justice. The only way a semblance of justice could be arrived at in this situation, described in verses 24 through 27, is to make financial compensation for the damage caused, which is exactly what Mashiach taught us. And we have other examples, as in the book of Luke, chapter 19, beginning at verse 1. Yeshua entered and passed through Jericho. Now behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, meaning he was somewhat of a traitor to his people, having association with the Roman oppressors. And he was rich, and he sought to see who Yeshua was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was of short stature. So he ran ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was going to pass the way. And when Yeshua came to the place, he looked up and saw him, and said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house. So he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. But when they saw it, they all complained, saying, he has gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner? Then Zacchaeus stood and said to the master, Master, I give half of my goods to the poor, and if I have taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore fourfold. And Yeshua said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he is also a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which was lost. Now, we have heard Rav Shaul speak of the letter of the Torah kills, but the spirit of the Torah gives life. We can see this in action through all of Mashiach's teachings. Whereas you have some who would play into the role of the adversary, using the Torah to accuse others and condemn others, we see Mashiach as our advocate, always looking to use the Torah in defense of others, for guidance, for instruction, for correction, for edification. There is nothing wrong with the Torah. The problem lies within us. How are we viewing the Torah? Are we viewing it through the spirit of Mashiach? And so, returning to our Parashat, we see in chapter 22, verse 20, another example. It says, so, Exodus 22, verse 20 in a certain translation. In this translation, it's verse 21. You shall neither mistreat a stranger, a sojourner, or a proselyte, nor oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. Continuing, you shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If you afflict them in any way, and they cry at all to me, I will surely hear their cry. This is justice. This is the justice of the Torah of Hashem. We have an explanation by Ibn Ezra regarding these passages that says the following. And a sojourner, or a stranger, proselyte, a convert, once this sojourner accepts not to worship idolatry, you cannot oppress him in your land, because you are more powerful than him. Remember, you were strangers like him. And the same way the text reminds you that the sojourner does not have power, so too the widow and the orphans who are among the children of Israel have no power. And after that, the text says, you shall not wrong. It uses the plural form. But then it says, if you do wrong them, it uses the singular form. This is because whoever sees a person oppressing an orphan or a widow and does not help the orphan or the widow, he too is considered as an oppressor. You must not mistreat any widow or orphan. Widows and orphans, like the sojourner, are at a disadvantaged position and are in need of assistance. This is telling us that not only are we not to oppress the stranger who is dwelling amongst us in our land, the immigrant, the person in need, the widow, the fatherless, the people who are poor, we are not to mistreat anybody. Because if we do, their cries will be heard by Adonai. And this is speaking to the children of Israel. This is speaking to those who profess to have covenant with the Creator. And so, we continue in verse 39 through 42 of chapter 11 in the book of Luke. We have examples of this justice that we are commanded to keep. And Mashiach tells us the following. Then the master said to him, now you Pharisees make the outside of the cup and dish clean, but your inward part is full of greed and wickedness. Side note, we know that the master is always correcting anyone who needs correction. But let us not make the mistake and think that he was against all of the leaders of his community, where we have many examples of him giving encouragement and actually reaffirming the teachings of many of the teachers in his generation. But right here, he's bringing correction. As he is Mashiach, he has the authority to do so. Foolish ones, did not he who make the outside make the inside also? But rather give alms of such things as you have. Then indeed all things are clean to you. But woe to you Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs, and pass by justice, Mishpat, and the love of Elohim. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. Often we have been taught these same passages among the community of believers we have heard these same passages to discourage people from following the righteousness given to us in the Torah. But right here, Mashiach is telling clearly that we ought to have done these without leaving the others undone. The priority is given to Mishpat, how we treat each other. And then we are not to neglect the other matters of Torah. So we are to not only focus on Mishpat, but once we internalize Mishpat, this social justice that we have with one another, then as we mature, we can go on and apply some of the more practical areas of Torah. It's very specific that Mashiach says, these you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. And so, returning to our parasha, we have another very important law that is very prophetic. In chapter 21, verse 16, it says the following: He who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he is found in his hand, shall surely be put to death. Now, an interesting story is given to us by Rabbeinu Bachya relating to the consequences of kidnapping and stealing an innocent person. And it's very fit that this understanding is given to us in Parashat Mishpatim. Because when one is unfamiliar with the laws of servitude in the Hebrew scriptures, then many horrible atrocities have been done throughout history. For example, the slave trade in the West has nothing to do with the laws of the servitude that we have in Torah. That is what happens when you don't have the original language and understanding that is given to the community of Israel, and even more so when you are not a true follower of Mashiach, because a true follower of Mashiach seeks to use the instructions of the Creator to help, to edify, not to condemn others. And so here is the example. We find the following text in Pirkei Hechalot. Rabbi Ishmael said that a decree to torture certain sages to death came out on a Thursday. News came from the capital in Rome that Emperor Lupinos had ordered the execution. The purpose of this decree was to complete the expiation needed for the sin of the brothers who had sold Yosef at that time and who had violated the prohibition written in Exodus 21:16. If someone steals and sells a person and that party concerned is found in his hands, he is to be executed. This decree, the application of this penalty, could be delayed all the time until, as it is written in Isaiah 24:21, in that day Adonai will punish the host of heaven in heavens and the kings of the earth on earth. This expiation could occur by means of the goats and the sheep on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Ishmael said that the angel Samael had heard all these threats and conditions, and that he had said that he accepted them. As a result, he chose 10 of the outstanding scholars of Israel to be that unexpired expiation, like a scapegoat for what had been done to Yosef. Now, I know this sounds a little odd to those who are unfamiliar with these teachings and this context, but please understand what Rabbeinu Bachya is saying is that righteous men can atone in some way, shape, or form for their people. In this example that is given, there was a necessity to rectify the sale of Yosef. And please understand that everything that happened to Yosef happened to Mashiach ben Yosef, Yeshua. He was sold and betrayed to the Romans, handed over to the nations. And there is a necessity for the rectification to bring the testimony of Mashiach back to the people of Israel. Rabbeinu Bachya understood this principle. Although He misunderstood who it was who rectifies and brings correction to this wrong. And so we have the example in the Zohar that tells us the following. In Zohar, Parashat Mishpatim, beginning at section 391 all the way through 395, it is written, it is said, the precept that follows is to redeem the Hebrew servant and the Hebrew maidservant, to marry off the Hebrew maidservant, and to contemplate the method of acquisition of the Hebrew servant. You shall furnish him liberally, as it is said in Devarim 15:14. As the verse reads, when you acquire a Hebrew servant, 6 years shall he serve. In our Parashat, Shemot 21 verse 2. He asks, what is meant by 6 years he shall serve? And how is he to be purchased? He answers, with the secrets of Torah. The messenger, the angel, Metatron, is the servant of Hashem. In the past Parashot, we see that Yosef is called Eved Ivri, the Hebrew servant. Yet here, on a spiritual dimension, we see that it is the messenger of Adonai's presence, Metatron, who is referred to as the servant of Adonai. We see, continuing in this Midrash, in regards to man's prayer, he can be like a servant, a bondservant, a slave, as it is written, 6 years shall he toil. Here, toil means prayer. 6 years shall he toil points to the first 3 and last 3 blessings of the Amidah, with which the cantor, the one who is singing these prayers, can fulfill man's obligation for one who is not capable of praying. In other words, an intercessor can step in for someone else. In this case, there is redemption through someone else, inasmuch as the cantor redeems him. The cantor is then called by the names of Boaz, righteous, kinsman, near kinsman, faithful. The message from those names illustrates that they redeem one who cannot help himself. When you read the Torah, are you reading it correctly? Are you reading it with the spirit of Messiah, looking to defend, to edify, to correct yourself, or to condemn and seeking self-righteousness? There's nothing wrong with the Torah. What's wrong is our hearts. We need to be in the spirit of Mashiach when we study Torah and seek how we can apply this in a way that is edifying to all of the people of Adonai, beginning with those who are already in covenant, the children of Israel, and extending to all those who are entering into covenant through Mashiach. And so we see in this very same parasha that this messenger of Adonai's presence is the same one who has the authority of his name. In chapter 23, verse 20, we are told, behold, I send an angel or messenger, malach, before you to keep you in the way, haderech. Yeshua is the way, haderech, the truth and the life. And to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Remember, Mashiach tells us, I go to prepare a place for you. My Father has many rooms in his home, in his mansion. 21, beware of him and obey his voice. Do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your transgressions. Why? For my name is in him. And we see in the book of Philippians in the renewed covenant that Mashiach is the one who made himself a bondservant in order to redeem us. And it is his name, Yeshua, that has been given above all names, because he alone has the authority of Yud He Vav He, blessed be he. And so we read in the book of Matthew, chapter 20, verse 25, the following, through 28. But Yeshua called them to himself and said, speaking to his disciples, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, meaning they exercise their authority over them. And those who are great exercise authority over their subjects. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your bondservant. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. He is the one who became an Eved Ivri for our sake. Think of the story of the prodigal son, who takes his inheritance and sells it, like Esau, after the lusts of the flesh. And then he sells himself to the nations, to the rulers of the nations, and finds himself feeding swine like the Maranos, caught up in the Roman system. But when he awakens and says, if I could just come back and be as a servant in my father's house, before he even arrives, his father's already waiting for him to bring him into restoration. And this is what Mashiach does. And this is what Mashiach calls us to do. These are the Mishpatim. This is social justice. That we study Torah in order to edify each other, to build each other, to strengthen each other, and to know how to live together in harmony. This is what the Spirit of Mashiach teaches us. We see in the book of Isaiah, chapter 1, starting at verse 15, the following, 15 through 17. When you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. Put away the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Whenever Mashiach healed, he said, go and sin no more. Yes, he used the Torah to defend, as he did with the adulterous woman. He used the Torah to defend her. But then he tells her, he tells everybody whom he brought healing to, go and sin no more. The emissary Yochanan tells us sin is transgression of the Torah. Yeshua says, go and stop breaking the Torah. Verse 17, learn to do good. Seek justice. Dirshu mishpat. Seek to do good between ourselves so that we can glorify our Father. Rebuke the oppressor. Not only are we not to oppress, but we are to rebuke the oppressor. Defend the fatherless. Plead for the widow. And returning to where we began in Matthew chapter 5, now going to verse 23 to 26, we see the following words of Mashiach. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, if you go to serve Adonai, to worship the Father in the heavens, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. First, make things right between ourselves. Before we come into service and obedience to the statutes that have been given to us, as we saw in the previous Parashat, the first half of the commandments or the speakings were for our relationship and conduct with Adonai, while the other half were our conduct amongst each other and how we are to treat each other. Mashiach is telling us, don't even concern yourself with acting as if you are serving the Creator if you cannot love your fellow brother, if you are not applying Torah to those around you. Agree with your accuser quickly while you are on the way with him, lest your accuser deliver you to the judge hand you over to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Assuredly, I say to you, you will by no means get out of there until you have paid the last penny. Our debt was paid for through Mashiach, who became an Eved Ivri for us. Now we are to reciprocate and spread what he has called us to do. He tells us that he requires chesed, which is sometimes translated as mercy or grace, and mishpat, the social justice that we are to do amongst ourselves. And he quotes from Hosea 6:6 saying that this is what Adonai requires. This is what he wants. Chesed. These are the weightier matters of Torah. Chesed and Mishpat. Grace and justice amongst ourselves. That we take care of the weaker members of our community. That we support each other and reconcile with each other. Then we can enter the more difficult commandments. The more practical commandments. Like Mashiach said, these we ought to do without leaving the others undone. Shavua Tov.